So hi and welcome to a edition of the podcast. It's a very special edition today. It's a joint podcast between myself and Caroline. Caroline, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us who you are.
Yeah, hi Rachel. I'm Dr. Caroline Walker. I'm an NHS trained psychiatrist and therapist, and I founded the Joyful Doctor, which is an organisation that's all about helping the wellbeing and mental health of doctors.
Right. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Rachel Morris. I'm a GP turned executive coach. I've founded an organisation and we run a programme called the Shapes Toolkit. We help doctors and other professionals in high stress jobs with resilience and productivity. I'm also a presenter on the Red Whale Lead Manage Thrive course, which is a leadership course for doctors. And I'm also host of the You Are Not a Frog podcast. And Caroline and I were chatting yesterday about actually what is it that we can do to support you guys and support doctors through this really difficult time. And we thought actually probably the best thing we can do is just try and get as much helpful stuff out there as possible. Try and share everything that we've heard of and lots of little resources that are out there and just collate them and present them in a way that's going to be helpful. Is that right, Caroline?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like many people out there, we were starting to notice that, the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic is starting to have on everybody's mental health. But in particular, we're seeing a lot of doctors really quite anxious and stressed and struggling a bit at the moment. So we really wanted to reach out and let you know that you're not alone, that we're all in this together and that there are things that can help you.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's, even if you think you're not struggling, I think underlying there's this huge sense of anxiety. I was having coffee with a friend yesterday and she said, I thought I was all right about it. But then I woke up at 5 o'clock this morning and couldn't get back to sleep.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of doctors saying about having some midnight waking and middle of the night waking and not being able to go back to sleep at the moment. I think that we're anxious, like many people, for ourselves and our loved ones, but we're also carrying and picking up on a kind of low-level general anxiety that's in the nation and internationally at the moment.
Yeah, it's tricky. So we were talking earlier about these sort of different stages of anxiety that we go through and also some of the different reasons why might be at the moment. What do you think the stage that we're in at the moment is?
Yeah, so I think COVID-19 is going to probably affect human beings on the planet in different stages, mentally speaking, psychologically speaking. And I think certainly in the UK at the moment, we're in the very first early stage, which is one primarily of feeling very anxious and quite fearful of, what's to come. Many of us are glued to our phones and the 24-hour news cycle, and becoming quite quickly overwhelmed about the possibility of what might be to come and what we're about to face. So I'd say that certainly in the UK we're in the first phase, which is primarily anxiety based.
And very much uncertainty as well, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're in this kind of strange place between two things where we really don't know what's going to come, but we're also being exposed to news from around the world of what might be about to come. So there's that kind of not knowing, but also seeing and thinking about perhaps some of the worst case scenarios that might be about to face us.
Yeah. I was chatting with a couple of friends who are GPs last night, and one of the things that was really troubling them is being asked to work in a way that's completely alien to them.
Yeah.
So it's not just doing telephone triage and video triage, it's actually not being able to help people in the same way that as doctors we want to be able to do. Have you seen that as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of that. So I'm seeing a lot of people in primary care, for example, GPs who are not able to bring patients in that they would normally like to bring in to see them face to face, being able to do home visits, that sort of thing. And in the hospitals, we're seeing entire departments and entire specialties completely redesigning the way that they are interacting with their patients, and rightly so, in order to try and help during this extraordinary time. But it's deeply unsettling, for everybody to be working in those different ways.
Yeah. So I'm interested in, psychologically, what is actually happening to us in this response?
So essentially, I mean, the lovely thing about human beings is we're really quite predictable. And when we get scared, it's a really common thing to get as a human being, is to get scared about something. We tend to experience a few different sort of symptoms and signs in different ways. So some of us will experience it mainly in the physical sense. So we'll get like symptoms of anxiety, like racing heartbeats, or perhaps shallow breathing, or sweating, or nausea, or feeling of tension, feeling of being on edge. And I'm seeing a lot of doctors at the moment talking about being like busy or just like on edge, just dotting from one thing to the other. So it's slightly more aroused kind of state. Some of us will experience it more in a thinking kind of way. So our anxiety is happening kind of more up in our head. So we're worrying. So we're getting kind of worst case scenario thinking, ruminating, staying stuck on, trying to problem solve, but getting really bogged down in it. And we'll also be experiencing the emotional side, obviously, of feeling, just feeling anxious, feeling, worried and concerned. So yeah, we as human beings, I think we're all reacting quite predictably at the moment to what is a really challenging situation. And I think it's important that we normalise that actually I'm feeling a bit nervous and anxious. We all are. And I think that's okay. That's normal. And we as human beings, we're going to get through this together. And there are little things we can do to help ourselves if things are getting a bit more overwhelming. But generally, I think most of us are going to feel that low level, and we're going to be okay if we can just do a few basic, simple things to look after ourselves.
Yeah, and we're going to come on with some sort of hints and tips in a minute, aren't we?
Yeah.
Just thinking about, the usual stress response where our amygdala's going threat, threat, threat. I guess the biggest threat is a physical threat, and of course we are seeing that, aren't we? Because there is a physical threat, albeit actually, for most of us it's pretty low. But for some of us, it isn't. And of course, we've got relatives and things and patients that we're worried about. So you've got the physical threat, but there's also a lot of other threats going on to us. And I think it's useful to acknowledge that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, yes, there is the direct threat of, say, catching the virus or it being spread amongst our loved ones or affecting those most, vulnerable in society. But there's also all those other more subtle threats to our sense of safety in the world, who we are as people, our kind of role as doctors, like all of these other things that are going on around that perhaps we're not naming or not thinking about. But there's a lot of threat kind of in the air at the moment, as well as the physical threat of the virus. Yeah,
and we were talking earlier about there's a model someone's come up with called the SCARF model, which is some sort of different threats that humans feel. So as well as a physical threat, you've got the sort of status hierarchy threat. I can't see that many people are feeling that at the moment, but definitely certainty. So status certainty, autonomy. I think there's a lot of autonomy is being taken away from us because we're being told what to do, which actually most of us are quite grateful for, but still we don't have those choices and the options. R stands for relatedness and the sort of safety of our relationships. So it's about what people think of you and what the group is like. And we're having to work very differently in groups at the moment. And then F is for fairness. So actually, there is a fairness threat around at the moment, isn't it? Lots of people are, being financially threatened as well, which isn't fair. And, so there's all these different threat levels. It's not just a physical thing. And like you said, I think it's really important to acknowledge that.
Yeah, and as doctors, we're typically in a position in society where we can actually have a really positive impact in people's lives and try to help people when they're going through all of these different stages of threat. But when a situation like this comes along and everything's kind of thrown up in the air and changing every 5 minutes, it feels like, it can get very difficult to feel like you're then as a doctor able to help and support people through these things when you might be facing them yourself. I'm seeing there's many doctors out there who are wondering how are they going to, what if somebody in their household becomes infected, they have to self-isolate, what if some that are being impacted by patients who are worrying about the virus directly, others where their patients are worrying about the economic impact. The impacts are far-reaching and varied, but I think what we can see is that it's impacting on everybody. So again, really important that we remember we're not alone in this.
So Caroline, how does just sort of acknowledging it, that we're all in it together, and accepting that it's normal, how can that help us?
Well, I suppose I like to think about that child in the playground at school who's being bullied. And I think, when you're the one that feels like you're the only one, everything feels overwhelming and impossible and difficult and worse. But the moment you can connect with other people who get it, the moment you can be hugged by a friend who says, it's okay, I was bullied once too, or I'm anxious too, you start to feel a sense of human connection that really soothes that anxiety. If you think about what somebody needs when they're anxious, they need reassurance, they need comfort, and that's something that comes from other people. So we can connect with other people. As doctors, we can connect with each other through this time and say, yeah, I'm struggling too. You're not the only one, we can do this together. You're going to be in a much stronger place than if you're just left on your own thinking, how am I going to cope, and left trapped in your own head.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I was with a friend at the weekend, and she was saying how their surgery has now just produced a WhatsApp group amongst each other. And it's just been so helpful, just A, for communication, but B, just for a bit of silliness and mutual support. It's a very little thing. But actually, that's really easy to do, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think we need to start using our technology for us, not against us. I'm seeing a lot of doctors who are struggling because they're trapped in the 24-hour news cycle, or they're, looking on their smartphones 100 times a day for the latest update. But actually, this amazing technology that we have available to us now, we can use it to help us rather than to make things worse. So we can use it to connect with each other, to share the lighter side as well as the worries. And I think it's about that balance and about keeping that in moderation.
Yeah. So I think this is interesting to me, this thing about balance, because so yesterday I went onto Facebook into a particular doctor's group and scared myself. And it put me for about an hour. I just felt awful just reading a couple of the posts there. But then later on I was looking at Twitter, and a guy a doctor who'd had coronavirus actually put out a very helpful post of, this is what happened on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. And I read it and thought, oh, okay, and he's now better. And that was really helpful. So is it that and I'm sure this isn't right, but you can say, is it that we just ignore all the bad stuff and only focus on the positive, or how do we get that balance?
Yeah, I think this speaks to a very fundamental difficulty about being human, actually, is that all of life is some good and some bad, isn't it? All of life has pain and sorrow and disappointment and sadness and love and joy and peace. And actually, I think we need to hold both and a bit of both. I think we need to be facing the reality of what's happening and acknowledging that this is a really tough and challenging time, but also be acknowledging equally that what we're seeing tremendous human response in really lovely ways, aren't we? Like the altruism out there at the moment, people setting up, very different groups and things to support their neighbours and their communities. And I think, how do you find that balance? I think it's a very individual thing, but I say for most human beings, I would say the number one thing to do is to reduce the amount of it overall. Just have a small amount of each. Now, for me, I'm trying to dip into the news about 10 minutes twice a day. I, like most people, am getting sucked into it now and again. But I think, trying to use that 24-hour news cycle to our advantage. If you feel like you're getting sucked down that rabbit hole and you're getting more anxious, reading the news and looking at those cases, turn it off, step away, ground yourself in your real life for a bit, and then you can always come back to it, right? It's always going to be there. It's not going anywhere. You're not going to miss anything. So it's about taking that personal, you said, you touched on the idea of us losing autonomy, that things are being taken out of our control. Sorry, there's a buzzing in the background.
Yes, you know what's just happened? A lorry has just pulled up outside my house.
This is life.
This is real life. This is an example of something, and we'll get onto control in a second, which you can't control. They're building a cycle path in front of my house. I'm like, are you really going to have a concrete lorry just as I'm recording the podcast? But I can't control it.
No. And I think it's accepting that and going, okay, do you know what? Doesn't matter. right? We can wait a few
Yeah.
seconds, we can laugh it
Yeah.
off, and we can move on.
Yeah. Well, tell me if the buzzing gets too loud, and then we'll just stop and then start again in a second. But let's carry on for a bit. So so I think one thing you can control is exactly what you said: how much news you look at, how much social media you consume. So there's things that we need to do. We need to look at the government updates to know what we're doing in clinical practice and to keep ourselves and our families safe. We need to follow policy, and I actually think the press conferences are really good that are going on at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's a really good example of how they've acknowledged that the nation's feeling pretty unsettled and unsafe, and they need strong leadership, and it's like children in a family. They need their parents to sort of step up and say, it's okay. Yes, something's happening, but it's going to be okay. We're in this together, and here's what we're going to do, and we're just going to take one day at a time. And that one day at a time approach, I think, is so valuable right now. It's something I use a lot in addiction recovery circles to help people to get sober and stay well, and just dealing with what we can control right now today, and trying to let go of what we can't control.
I think that is such an important principle. I know on my training I always say we need to be more gazelle. So it's this whole principle that when a gazelle is eating the grass and a lion comes along, it runs off, doesn't it? And then when the lion is gone, it just goes back to eating grass. So it's in the present moment, but we're constantly reliving and pre-living stuff that hasn't happened.
And I think this is the difficulty being a human being, is that the initial threat of the lion eating you is all well and good. But what happens with humans is when the lion's gone, we keep the threat going by thinking about the threat. So we think about, am I going to catch this? Am I going to have to self-isolate? So how's this going to happen? What's this going to happen? And a certain amount of that is really important, and we need to do it. But if we let it get out of control, we can very quickly, like you described yesterday beautifully, we can very quickly become really quite unwell, actually, in a short term, get very, very anxious, very worked up, and become really ineffective, and not pay attention to things we need to be doing in our day-to-day lives.
So I think there are a few ways that we can stop pre-living stuff. First one is avoid too much overconsumption of social media and panicky stuff. How can we stop ourselves having these thoughts? Can we stop the thoughts, or what can we actually do?
It's a great question. The short answer is no. We cannot stop ourselves having worrying thoughts. We are human beings. We absolutely get intrusive, worrying, negative, anxious thoughts. All of us do, all the time. Really, 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 really normal. What we can do is learn to look at our relationship with those thoughts. So rather than going with them and following them and going off down that little rabbit hole where we just encourage them and look at more social media and look at more and try and plan, we go, oh, okay, I'm feeling anxious, I'm having an anxious thought. Let me just stop for a minute and maybe distract myself, or do something, or think about something deliberately different. They're really common, really normal. We're all going to get these anxious thoughts. So it's not about stopping them. It's about realizing they're coming and they're normal. I think sharing them can be helpful to some extent. Just to normalize that everyone else is getting the same thoughts, but not oversharing them. So not spending your whole day on those WhatsApp groups and on Twitter and with your friends talking over and over and over and over the constant ramifications. And so a little bit of sharing, but not oversharing. And then I think there are some techniques you can put in place, like starting to challenge some of the thoughts. So, for example, if you're getting a worst case scenario thought like, my dad, personally, to use a personal example, my dad's got some underlying health conditions and he's in a high risk age group, and so I'm concerned if he gets ill, what will happen? And in my mind at that moment, my thought is he's like almost 100% likely to get this. There won't be an ITU bed, he'll die, everything's awful, it's like worst case, oh my God. But if I stop for a moment and just challenge that slightly, I remember that probably 99% or so of people are going to get this illness, have it fairly mildly, and get better. But we are lucky enough to live in a society where if he does get unwell, there will be healthcare professionals there willing to help him. And actually, more people that get a severe illness survive it than die from it. So I start to see the reality and the real risk rather than the imagined scary, oh my God, he's 100% going to get it risk. So just, if you can catch those thoughts, you can just start to gently challenge them and say, okay, what's the evidence for that? Actually, the evidence is most of us are going to be fine.
Something I find myself doing is, what if I get it? What if I'm one of those unlucky people that get it badly?
Yeah.
What if I
Yeah.
die? Then how are my kids going to cope? How will
Yeah.
they react?
Yeah.
What will it be
Yeah.
like at my funeral? Blah. And I've suddenly gone down this
Yeah.
absolute rabbit hole of...
Yeah. 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 And the key words you use, and I think a lot of the nation are having that exact experience,
Yeah.
and I've certainly had it a few times in recent days. And again, that's really normal. Yeah. But just catching yourself doing it is the first thing, because then you have a choice. You can either carry on down that rabbit hole, or you can stop. Take a few deep breaths and recenter in your real life, and remember that right now you are okay. You are well. Your loved one is well, or they might be unwell, but they're okay. You know, just trying to reground in reality a little bit in that moment can be really helpful. Distraction, really powerful technique. I think we don't use enough. So just getting busy doing something for 2-3 minutes, doesn't matter what, can be, you know, walking around the house, can be doing a bit of doing the washing up, whatever, just something, just doing something different, shaking yourself out of that habit.
Well, going something I thought of, because obviously one of the wellbeing factors, and we'll probably do another podcast on this, looking after yourself and well-being, but well-being factors is doing something to get into flow. So I actually thought, when I start doing this, I'm going to go and play the piano.
Nice.
Because that will get me straight into flow and just stop me thinking about it. And, you know, maybe this is one time I might say, get on your phone and play Crossy Road. Or something really, really daft. So what you're saying is we're not trying to suppress or ignore the thoughts.
No.
We have it, but then we just say, actually, I'm not gonna pay too much attention to it right now.
I'm not going to go with it. I'm going to just notice they're there, and I'm going to choose to think about something else. And if the thought comes back, you just do the same thing again. You say, oh, there it is again. Okay. Just, I see you there, thought. But it's like, we don't want to suppress them, because actually that makes them worse. Yes, it's like, try not to think of a pink elephant. You know, everyone thinks of a pink elephant, right? So if we try not to worry, if we try not to have those worrying thoughts, they're going to come back in a vengeance, and we're going to get more of them. So actually, normal to have them, really, really normal. We're all having them. Share them a little bit, and then move on. Distract yourself, think about other things, maybe challenge them slightly.
Now, I've just read a really good book, which was recommended by Lee David, who's one of the authors of the mental health course for Red Whale, which is called The Happiness Trap, about acceptance and commitment therapy. And that has been enormously helpful to me, in that it talks about the fact that we fuse with our thoughts. So we're having these thoughts all the time, but actually we can choose whether we're going to fuse with it and believe it and do it or not. And it's not whether, is this thought true or not? It's actually, is it helpful to me right at this moment?
Yeah, because we can all change our thoughts at any time, right? If I asked you now to think about the last meal you ate, you would start thinking about the last meal you ate. We're all in control, of where our thinking goes. It might not feel like it sometimes, particularly at times like this. And I think that's why we're struggling a bit at the moment, and why more people are feeling anxious, is because the level of information that's coming at us is kind of overwhelming our defenses a little bit. So we just need to get back in control of our defenses, and say, actually, do you know what? I control that. I decide how much news I watch. I decide how many worrying thoughts I'm going to have in a day, And something that works for some people is to have designated worry time.
Yes.
Doesn't work for everybody, but for some people it's a really great technique. So you would literally put aside 15 to 30 minutes in a day that's going to be your worry time. And that's when you deliberately sit down, you let yourself worry about anything and everything in that time. Outside of that time, when a worry comes into your thoughts, you go, oh, okay, I'll pop that down and I'll worry about that.
Yeah. And 9 times out of 10, when you get to the worry time, you're like, oh, actually,
I
don't want to worry about that anymore.
Yeah. So it can be a helpful technique. I'd say try it. It doesn't work for everybody, but and I guess it's important to think about those of us that have got a more severe anxiety type problem going on, because the things that we're talking about here are for kind of everyday level of worries and anxiety. But for some, anxiety disorders are very, very, very common. Probably affecting somewhere in the region of 1 in 4 people. Right. And for some at this time, they're going to be a little bit better, actually, because we've got something else to think about. But for many, it's going to make their anxiety levels that little bit higher. And if you're a doctor out there that's really, really struggling with your anxiety, or you're starting to notice it's impacting on your day-to-day function, then there is help out there for you, and we're going to come on to that, please. support in a minute.
Yeah. So it's really sort of proactively managing one's anxiety, and this is not just for people who suffer with anxiety disorders. This is for all of us. And I love the worry time, and the worry time. We used that with one of my daughters when she was feeling very anxious. So we had a worry box. She'd write down her worries, put in the worry, and then we'd talk about them later in the evening. And for her, whenever she started ruminating through the day, I could just say, put it in the worry box. And she did, and that was really helpful.
And you can do that. So another way you can use your technology to help you is stick it on your phone, right? Most of us carry our smartphones now. We might not carry a notebook and pen like we used to, but we carry a smartphone. So in your notes section, jot the worry down, write it down. Because if you're writing it down, you're getting it out of your head. And that's, really powerful.
I think one thing is, like you said, acknowledge it, but then you can choose to ignore it. So in this, the Happiness Trap book, it talks about being very mindful. So almost part of you acting as observer to your thoughts rather than not thinking them. And whenever you get a worrying thought or a thought that's not helpful, you sort of go, oh, I'm having the thought, rather than saying, I'm thinking this, I'm having the thought that, or I notice that I'm having the thought that. Or if you want to really simplify it, you can just go, oh, thanks, mind. It's going to be awful. Oh, thanks, mind. And then just, park it. I'm choosing at this moment not to fuse with that thought. Thanks, mind. If I think it's a thought worth fusing with, maybe I'll put it in the worry box to do later. But right this moment, that thought isn't going to serve me very well.
Yeah. One of my favourite authors is Brené Brown. I don't know if you've come across her stuff on she's a vulnerability and shame researcher from Texas, and she's got some incredible, she's got a brilliant TED Talk. If you haven't seen that, do go and search that. So Brené Brown talks about, I've lost my train of thought there, raving on about how wonderful Brené Brown is.
We're talking about just saying thanks, mind, or not having to fuse with the thought, putting it in our worry box, coming back to it later.
Yeah, she talks about using a phrase, the story I'm telling myself is. And I find that it's a slightly funny thing to get your head around, but it's like, the story I'm telling myself is everyone in my family is going to catch COVID and die from it, and there won't be enough ITU beds, and then I'm going to, imagining your children at your funeral, like you were saying, and off it goes. That's the story that we're telling ourselves in our head. That's what it is. It's not the reality of what's happening right now. Which for you and I right now, thankfully, is that we are safe and well. And even if we do, get ill or our loved ones do, they will probably be okay. They will be safe and well. So, distinguishing between what's reality and what's the stories that we're telling ourselves, what's our thinking telling us.
Absolutely. And this is a really powerful technique. And I use that phrase in my training. The story in my head is when I find myself in that stress response, in the amygdala response, where I'm in my fight, flight or freeze.
Yeah.
At that point, it's the story in my head that's causing that stress response.
Yeah.
Not what's actually happening.
Yeah. And I think the difficulty is, so a lot of doctors are saying back to me at the moment, well, but hang on a minute, it is happening. I'm going to work and I'm seeing patients who are sick, or loved ones who can't see their relatives who are sick, or I'm in ITU and there's not enough beds, or I'm in, we're starting to hear and see all these stories, and we're seeing really quite disturbing and stressing stories coming from around the world about what might be to come. And so they're saying, actually, this is happening. So again, it goes back to that idea that that it's accepting that both are true.
Yes.
That something really difficult can be going on, but we can also be in control and think about how we are accessing the information, how we are thinking, and how we are approaching it. Yeah.
So there's something in the Happiness Trap book that really helped me as well about this idea of if you fight against your emotions, they just get worse.
Yeah.
But if you go, oh, that's interesting, I'm feeling anxious, that is a feeling that I'm having, because it's really interesting. It talks about the fact that we label emotions as good emotions and bad emotions. So we'd say fear is a really bad emotion, but actually a lot of us watch scary stuff and horror films to get scared. So it's not necessarily about, I'm watching Stranger Things with my son at the moment. Oh my gosh, I just, but so fear is a sort of good thing in that way. So that the more you fight against it, the more it just grows and the more it overcomes you. Actually, just to stop and think, oh, that's interesting. Where am I feeling this in the body? Because often it's the sensations that we feel uncomfortable with, don't like it. And then sort of using some mindfulness, maybe breathing techniques to expand into that emotion, which weirdly takes away its power. Am I talking any sense here, Caroline?
You are making perfect sense, and you're absolutely right. I
Right.
think all of our emotions are important and valuable and needed. So, and I think one of the emotions, we're talking a lot about fear and anxiety today, but I think one of the other emotions that we often miss is anger. And those two emotions, fear and anger, we often label them as being really bad, really potentially overwhelming, really, we want to get rid of them, right? We don't want to feel them. But actually, they're both incredibly useful, powerful, helpful, normal human emotions. And they actually energize us to do what we need to do, right? So if we were all feeling 100% laid back right now, we wouldn't be putting in the measures and things that we need to be doing to fight this thing. Yeah. So I think it's about going, actually, anger's my friend. Fear is my friend. All of these emotions are good, healthy, normal emotions. And you're absolutely right. If we try to deny them or bury them or suppress them, or then they just come back with a vengeance. So it's about finding healthy ways to do it. Yeah. So with anger, instead of starting a fight with your neighbour and punching them in the face, you might want to punch a cushion in your or your bed or something like that, something that's not going to hurt you in any way. With the anxiety and the fear, channeling it into a more helpful route. So, okay, I'm a bit nervous about my elderly neighbour. Maybe I'll drop around a note through the post box just to say I'm here if they're self-isolating and I can help them, deliver some shopping or something. So using that kind of anger for an energy, a positive energy that helps us to get through what is actually a threatening and challenging time.
Yeah. So don't be frightened of those emotions that we're getting. They're normal. Embrace them. Use them. Mindfulness coping. And we haven't yet mentioned mindfulness. I mean, I think how helpful do you think that is?
I think it's incredibly helpful in some circumstances, and I think it's easier said than done in a lot of circumstances too. So I think the principle of it's basically what we've been talking about this whole time is actually just being aware of what's happening in the moment and not judging it and just staying present. So, and that's mindfulness, right? It's just non-judgmentally paying attention to something. So if you're a doctor in a busy A&E shift and you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, just stopping for that 2 or 3 seconds, taking a breath and going, oh, I feel a bit overwhelmed right now. That's mindfulness. And that can be really helpful, because if you can stop and go, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, then you have a choice to do something about that. You have a choice whether you just kind of dig in and carry on, or whether you go and take a minute, you go to the loo or you get a drink, or you just sit down for a minute and just gather your thoughts and, regroup. You've got a choice. So if you can be mindful about what's going on for you moment to moment, I think it's incredibly helpful. I don't think it's the only tool out there, and I think we need to be using it as one of many, many different tools meant to help us.
Yeah, and I like the fact you're mentioning these actual things that we can do at work as well. These basic hygiene factors that sometimes we forget about when we're so busy and anxious. Taking a break, going to the
mental
loo,
hygiene.
hygiene. We do need to stop and refuel. And connecting with people at work, even more important now than
100%.
it ever was. You need to maybe start having a 5-minute huddle at the beginning of the day and a 5-minute debrief at the end of the day, or in the middle of the day as well, as much as you can, because this is what's going to keep you happy.
We know from looking at supporting people psychologically after big events like natural disasters or terrorist attacks, things where something massive has come along and infected a whole community and impacted in a big way, which is essentially what's happening right now with COVID. The most important thing you can do is to connect with your usual support network. So that's exactly what you're describing. And it doesn't have to be big ways. So it could be a little WhatsApp group with your colleagues. It could be a little huddle at the beginning, middle and end of your shift. It could be that extra phone call into your friend or your parent or your loved one. But just staying connected in safe ways, obviously following the government guidance around physical contact, but just stay connected. It's the most powerful thing we can do for ourselves at the moment to get through this.
Yeah. And just a little hint, something I never knew. I think I'm a bit technophobic, but last night I wanted to speak to my wonderful sisters-in-law who are at the front line. And on WhatsApp, you can literally hit the call button, press video call, and choose who you want on the call, and then you can all see each other. Like, and
Yes,
I don't know how many
call.
I don't know how many people you can get on there, you know. But there are, if you want something, you know, a bit more tech, you can use Zoom, which is really good, and I know Microsoft Teams and Skype. So actually, why aren't we? I thought to myself, why don't I do this every week?
Well, I think this is going to be one of the hidden positives that comes out of
Yeah.
this whole thing, actually, is that we're all going to get a little bit more comfortable and confident using face-to-face ways of communicating. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I think it's really important now to put that in more than ever. The happiest doctors I see, or the most well doctors, I would say, are the ones that have strong support networks and regularly commit to them. And I do this, I follow this myself. I have absolutely dozens of people around me that I'm connecting to at the moment that are supporting me to get through the next few months. Absolutely,
100% agree. And also, it's different people for different things. So it may be, as doctors, what we need to do is have our doctors, you know, don't necessarily rely on people that aren't in the same situation to offer particular types of support, but then for other types of support you can. So actually, just like you, I'm a member of about 4 or 5 different groups, and I use them for different types of support and different types of love and different types of community.
Yeah, and different psychological needs. Right? There's nothing more powerful than somebody getting what it is that you're going through. So we were talking, we're both mums, and I think, you know, we're about to face the potential school closures, and in fact one of my children is already off school, and you know, so for that I'm trying to connect with other mums, right, in a similar situation, and whereas with my work in doctors' wellbeing and trying to support the wellbeing of doctors through this, I've gathered a little group of people that are already in that group so that we can support each other. And for my family, we've got those groups and so on. So it's do think more. You can't have too much support out there, I think.
So you cannot get too much support. I love that. I've been jotting down all these resources so we can put them in the notes afterwards. Let's move on to proactively what can people, well, first of all, what you mentioned, what people can do to get help if they feel that they've got more severe anxiety issues.
Well, actually, if I start with the sort of lower level of anxiety that we're all feeling at the moment, so this is particularly for doctors. So if you're kind of just feeling that bit of anxiety and increased sort of just what we're all feeling at the moment, the sort of, you're kind of well generally, but you're just feeling it at the moment because of everything that's going on, then we would signpost you to the BMA Wellbeing Service. Now, this is for any doctor. You don't have to be a member of the BMA. And if you just Google it, BMA Wellbeing, you'll come across, they've got like a 24/7 like counselling support service they can set up so you can speak to somebody. They've got a range of different support options there. If you're a doctor in England and that is particularly struggling, like say you've got an underlying, you think there's something a bit more severe going on, so you've got a severe anxiety disorder or a depression, or you feel you might have PTSD, or there's something, it's a bit more severe, so you're it's interfering with your function, so perhaps you're not feeling that safe at work, or it's causing problems at home, then I'd suggest you get in touch with the practitioner health program, NHS Practitioner Health. We'll put the links in the bottom of the podcast for all of these resources. They are a fantastic service that offer free and confidential mental health advice and support for doctors across England, and that's self-referral, completely confidential. I work with them, I do some work with them, they're fantastic. You can come and see somebody like me and really get some time and space to think what might be going on and get the extra support and help you need around your mental health at the moment. Those are the 2 big ones I wanted to signpost. My website, joyfuldoctor.com, has a list of free resources. There's about 40 or 50 resources on there for doctors for the UK and internationally, most of which are free. And so have a look on there as well. There's lots and lots out there. I'd also say, and I'm sure you're going to share as well, that if any of you out there are struggling, please just get in touch with myself or Rachel, because we want to help and support you, and if we can't help you directly, we will signpost you and get you the support you need. So please know that there are lots of supports out there, and there's lots of us out there that are really thinking about you in all of this, that are here to try to help keep you well mentally through this challenging time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd also recommend lots of different books. We'll put them in the show notes. There's the one I was talking about, The Happiness Trap, about acceptance and commitment therapy, which I found really helpful. I think The Chimp Paradox is also very helpful.
Yeah, fantastic. If you're interested in mindfulness, the Finding Peace in a Frantic World book is quite good. It's got a CD with it. And there's loads of apps out there as well, like Calm and Headspace, which can be really helpful. And a lot of us have like smartphones and smart watches now that have little breathing things on them.
Actually,
mine's a Fitbit, and it does, like, you can watch this circle go in and out and breathe and stuff, and it's lovely. So start to use your technology and your support networks to help you through this.
And if there's loads of podcasts out there, I think, that are really, really helpful. And I would say just sort of listen to other stuff as well. Don't just immerse yourself in the whole medical stuff. Just listen to some inspiring podcasts. And actually, there's a couple of episodes recently I've listened to, which I'll share in the show notes there. So
there's some absolutely amazing podcasts out there. Obviously yours is brilliant. You Are Not a Frog, Rachel, and mine, The Joyful Doctor. Do check those out as well.
So we'll both keep going with those, I think, just to so that people can listen to other stuff as well. But also, I think we're really keen to keep going with this, perhaps, so that we can just keep people up to date with our thinking and the useful resources that we've come across.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to, please like and love and share, and when you see this and hear this, on whatever medium you're listening to us or watching us, and please comment and let us know if you want us to cover particular topics or to do more of these things, or if you've got any ideas you want, because we really want to try and help as many doctors as possible through the coming times.
Yeah, so let us know what you'd like to see, what resources would be helpful, and we will do our best to access those and get you out the links and just share whatever. We'll try and be a sort of library, a bit of a collector of the ideas that we can share out to you. So before we finish, Caroline, what are your top 3 tips? If you said to anyone, if you're going to do 3 things over the next week, what would they be for people?
Top 3, limit your exposure to the information flow to, I'd say, under an hour a day, less than that if you can, and balance it, with some good, some bad stuff. Connect, absolutely 100% connect. Don't do this on your own. Don't sit there quietly worrying away. Talk to someone, share what you're feeling and thinking, get help and support. I guess third one would be to get help, lean on your support. Lean on your support. It's okay. You can't have enough support.
Great. And I think
too much support, what I mean.
You can't get you can't get enough support. There we are. You can't have too much. My top 3 very practical tips is, firstly, self-care. Do not forget to look after yourself. Get enough exercise. I think my number 1 tip is exercise, actually. Because I think if you're having trouble sleeping, then just make yourself a bit more knackered. We will all perform better with exercise. So find a way of, even if you're at home, there is self-isolating. There are still 7-minute HIIT apps that you can do, and all those sorts of things. You will feel better.
Videos, there's all sorts of
loads of stuff. So make sure you look after yourself physically as well as mentally. So be proactive. I think make yourself a plan about how you're going to manage your anxiety and your emotions, and set some boundaries. So it limit the social media. Say how much I'm going to watch and when am I going to do that. So get yourself a little plan. Another quick tip, I think, keeping a gratitude journal is phenomenally helpful. About every day,
Absolutely.
What 3 things are you grateful for, and that will start to you'll start to look out for those 3 things to look out for. And I think gratitude is one of the antidotes to anxiety, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's almost impossible to feel gratitude and to feel those sort of really
feel anxious at the same time. And
yeah.
maybe share that with your network. Let's start some gratitude posts or whatever. And my third one is just like you, stay connected. So practical things you can do: set up a WhatsApp group if you haven't got one already, with as many different people as you can who are going to be helpful. Maybe instigate 5-minute team check-ins, or if you're not doing it, go around and say, right, I'm calling time. We're having a coffee break, 10 minutes, all of us. And maybe individually, and this is something you've done for me, Caroline, I really appreciate it. So how are you? How are you feeling today? Not just, how are you? It's how are you doing today individually, just when you see people?
Yeah, and when you get asked that question, answer it honestly. You know, don't just say, "I'm fine, thanks. I'm okay," or "I'm just getting my head down," or you know, no. Actually, just for a moment, allow yourself to tell someone how you're really feeling, and it will help.
Yeah, great, brilliant. So we will be back hopefully.
We will
watch this space for more stuff. Please comment, communicate with us about what you'd like to have, what would be helpful. Share your stories, and just sending so much love out there to all our colleagues.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening. Please share this far and wide if you think it's going to be helpful for anyone, any doctors you know, any other healthcare professionals. And please just get in touch if you need.
Brilliant. Thanks everyone. Thanks Caroline. See you
soon. Thanks Rachel. Bye.
Bye.